What is design thinking? Why does it matter to today's business?
Design thinking is really about, it's about a number of things. At its core, I think it's about putting the end user at the center of a process for thinking about how to make sense of things. So I think design fundamentally is about how to make sense of things. I think that's what design does, whether it's a door handle or an online bank account or or a mobile dating app. Design helps make sense of what is underneath the surface. And what has happened in the last few years is that gradually people have realized is the techniques and tools that we use to do what we would call service design, the development and thinking through of new services or the reinvention of old services, those tools are things which actually have wider applicability. And they have wider applicability to thinking about problems where what people are fundamentally grappling with are making sense of things, making sense of organizational structures, making sense of how employees fit within an organization, how they interact with it on a daily basis, making sense of how a business collaborates with partners, government, other stakeholders, etc., etc. The rise of design thinking has basically been about taking those tools. Many of those tools are focused on putting the user at the center and thinking about it in what is traditionally is an inversion of the usual way of thinking about things, which is company first. So you're inverting it, you're putting the user at the center and you're thinking from the outside in. That's really what design thinking does.
Are we in the middle of a design revolution in the sense like, okay, we can think of over eras of design, like fashions and certain things would evoke certain decades or eras. But right now you're seeing design as a almost a virtuous fact about a business. Like if you think about Apple, for example, I mean, design is the core of its thing. It's no longer made by Apple; it's designed by Apple. And one of the things that came out of it too was that there aren't really enough designers in the world to meet the needs of this revolution. What are your thoughts on that? Is it a revolution, and are there enough people?
There aren't enough people, and there's definitely a war for talent. So that's an easy one to answer. So is it a revolution? Yes, I think it is, because we're having to constantly reinvent what the design processes that we use and the way we go about things, because we are designing for radically different things now. Like I said earlier, most digital designers a few years back were just thinking about users who would be using their designs on a screen this big with a keyboard and a mouse. Now they're having to think about users that will be using on every size of screen down to this size and beyond. So Amazon Echo doesn't have a screen, purely voice-enabled device. And so it's for screens and then no screens, but it's also for different interaction paradigms. So not just keyboard and mouse, but touch, swipe, location is an interaction paradigm, voice, gesture. As these things happen, so the complexity of what we're dealing with is growing manifold, and we in manifold ways, and we have to look at design as a process all the time and constantly reinvent it without losing sight of some core principles. In our case, elegant simplicity is our design mantra, but we have to constantly reinvent what we're doing. So revolution, maybe having now run through the answer, it's not so much revolution as it's ongoing change, but at considerable speed.
The interesting thing about it is when I hear what you're saying there, it's like designers once upon a time used to have kind of also straightforward jobs. I mean, one person would do a layout and design of a newspaper, another person would lay out and design clothing, or another person would design cars. Now you're designing experiences, and one of the interesting things that came up in the panel was part of the materials that designers now work with is data. How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about data as a core material for? Well, I mean, Lorna said it, and I thought it was a fantastic quote. It is a material. It's a great way of thinking about it. And we've used data for a very long time. Not many people know this, but Florence Nightingale was actually a data designer. And one of the ways in which she convinced the powers that were in the British Army to change the way in which they ran hospitals was by using data design, by using information design, to show where people were dying and what they were dying from. And it turned out most of the soldiers were dying off the battlefield in hospitals. And she used what you would now describe as a pie chart in order to show that. And so we've been using data for a very long time now. What is happening, I think, the shift now is not so much about the representation as data, although we're seeing a lot more of that over the last few years. We're also seeing designers having to think, how are we going to use our design to generate more data? Not in and of an end in itself. That's boring, otherwise you just...
Lots of data.
Lots of data, what do you do with it? But thinking through, if I could get data, what might we then do with it? Or what might we want to do which data would enable, and therefore how am I going to extract that data from what the user is doing? And that will then power the ability for us to change services in real time around the context of the user. And that is immensely powerful and will definitely usher in a new era.
The interesting thing as well you guys are working on here in Dublin is actually, I understand Fjord is involved in the new design of the new innovation centre in Dublin.
Yeah.
And I met the people behind Julie Spillane, I think, and she's planning. I mean, we had a great discussion about what I got from it was, it isn't just going to be a building, it's going to be a very modular experience where you can augment the building to suit different things, create different scenarios, create different products. That it's just not going to be a building with purpose, it's going to be a building with many, many purposes.
Yes.
Could you tell me a bit about what it is you're designing around that, how you're doing it and what you're thinking?
So the aim of the Innovation Centre is to act as a beacon where we can work not only with clients but also actually, and I particularly love this bit, with members of the public, with users, and bring them in and actually create stuff with them. And what we know now is that you need to create, if you like, fungible spaces which can adapt around the needs of the thing it is you're trying to do and the audience you've got in there and the people who are going to come in and be stakeholders with you. And I think that's what's driving Julie and her team, is the creation of spaces where that can happen comfortably. I think the other thing we've seen really, really clearly, again in the last 5 or 6 years, is the way in which we've learned that, and large companies are just beginning to learn this, but very slowly in some cases, that making design very visible, literally on the walls around you, is a key way of engendering great results. So the reason for that is because actually when you think about it, a lot of the complex stuff, and a lot of the stuff we're dealing with is very, very complex. How do you reinvent the experience for an entire telco, for example? How do you create a new bank for millennials? These are not easy things to necessarily do. How do you reinvent a healthcare system? How do you reinvent a tax system? Lots and lots of different stakeholders, lots of different processes involved in that. What I think we found, though I don't think anybody did it explicitly, I think it happened, if you like, implicitly, was that trying to pack all of that into a PDF or a spreadsheet, which you could then look at on a screen this big, was never going to work. And that I think the work has exploded out literally onto the walls of places like the Innovation Centre, because we found it's a great way to actually get the big picture. And you need to see the big picture as well as seeing the individual tiles that make up the mosaic. In fact, I go further than that and say one of the challenges with innovation is you tend, in my view, experience to have two sorts of people. Those who very rapidly see the big picture, actually probably slightly less bothered about the individual tiles, and those who won't see the big picture of the mosaic unless they can see how all the tiles build up. And that's what the Innovation Centre will do, is it'll give people the ability to see both of those things.
Because I always saw design, I always seen design as communication. I mean, when I think about it, when I think of you mentioned there a door handle. I mean, from a practical point of view, it should immediately be obvious to me that I should be able to use the door handle, right? Yes. So is that the thinking? Like, for example, if you're trying to communicate things like, say, Amazon's Echo, for example, obviously you want a physical space to experience so people can understand it or get it straight away. Yeah. Or as you say, people need to nitty-gritty to kind of see, well, this is one system voice talking to another system that could be an ERP system that's suddenly going to order the milk and bring to your house. Is that how you see it, as a kind of an envisioning process, a communications process?
Yeah, very much. Very much. And what we're also discovering, and again, this is, a lot of this is very recent. We've discovered a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. We've had a team of people in New York who've pioneered something called MakeShop, and what MakeShop has been revelatory to us. What it does is that together with clients, we actually build stuff. We literally build stuff on a table. So sometimes, and we have a fantastic R&D unit in Austin now, in the company Chaotic Moon that we acquired a year ago. What they're amazing doing is actually building digital products there and then using technology. MakeShop can do that, but it can also, it doesn't necessarily have to plug together technology. What it can do is it enables you, using a series of models and bits of paper and cardboard and Lego and whatever, to build the service in front of you physically. And what was interesting is that the point of doing that is you build to think. So you're not actually building the end product, it's the process of building that allows you to really explore what that end product or service should be.
So different avenues your mind goes down to kind of make, maybe you might go off on a whole pivot, on a whole new service.
And looking at that, if you like, in 3 dimensions on a table is very different from trying to draw it on a computer screen. And that's why it's such a useful technique. So again, what the Innovation Centre will be about is about creating the facility for people to use these different techniques, to be able to examine a problem from a number of different angles.
How do you think design, it's a question I wasn't expecting to ask you, but how do you think design will filter into our professional everyday lives? If you think about it, there are ways now, for example, of modeling data to kind of do a better job of presenting a situation or explaining something than the old PowerPoint way of doing things, for example. Most of us going through the working world, we learned how to use Word and PowerPoint and Excel and various email packages. We could be entering a whole new world where the very process you described could be our way of maybe presenting a new product in the company, or a new way of presenting to win an exam, pass an exam in a college. I mean, how do you see design entering our professional lives or our working lives? Because as kids we used to draw stuff all the time.
I mean, I'm a little reluctant to jump on that one and say yes, it's going to infect everything. I think we need to remain pretty humble, actually. Design is not the be-all and end-all. It's not going to solve every problem in the world. It works in collaboration with a number of other ways of thinking and doing things. I don't think it can actually solve everything that we might like it to, and we certainly shouldn't be running around telling people it can.
Want to be in the audience next time? Click here for tickets to Inspirefest 2017.